Agriculture Minister David Littleproud, thanks for joining us on the Flow Network.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Let's just talk first of all about this new ag visa you announced on Monday. Just give us a brief rundown on what that's intended to achieve.
Yeah, look, it's complementary and supplementary to our Pacific schemes where we found 25,000 men and women from 10 Pacific nations. This goes more into starting with Southeast Asian countries and also the UK, but we'll expand it right across. It's not just unskilled work, this visa. It's actually skilled and semi-skilled. And it's not just for horticulture. It's right across the agricultural sector, as well as fisheries, forestries, and the processing sector. So this is about a biggest structural shift in agricultural workforce in our nation's history. Because what we're doing with this also, with this visa, is we're giving a pathway to permanent residency. So we're bringing the next generation of migrants to build and grow regional Australia and to grow agriculture. So that's why this is such a significant change. But it's going to the heart also of helping those Pacific schemes and the incentives we're giving around Australians that do the work in our farms at the moment to try to add another program to give that support. The scale of the problem hasn't changed, and it's been identified over 12 months ago what was needed in terms of workers. This is simply another program that'll be added to the suite of programs to try and incentivise Australians, but also foreigners to do this work, because farmers have been very patient. They've waited, but now they need the surety to be able to make the investment decisions to know that they're going to have the labour when the crops are ready to get it off their paddock and into your plate.
So, Minister, that's probably working towards the mid to long-term solutions, but there's a real concern, even your Nationals colleagues in Victoria talking about tens of thousands needed for this year's horticultural and other harvests. Will it be able to help with that immediate problem, just the visa itself?
It will. So the 30th of September is the start date, and the bilateral discussions are now starting to take place now that we've announced the start date. That allows the foreign minister to now have conversations with those embassies and also those countries to be able to sign up to this. Because while we say, yes, we're going to give an ag visa, we actually have to have those countries agree to allow their citizens to be able to participate. So those discussions are happening straight away, but it's available from the 3rd of September. Now, that doesn't mean that we expect to see people come in straight away after the 1st of September, but it won't be long after that, depending on the bilaterals. So it will be in play this year. We should see people come in, but the biggest constraint on that will be the quarantining of not only those, but also those 25,000 men and women that are sitting in the Pacific, and that'll be dependent on the states. The states have said, and as far back as December, and in fact your Premier, Dan Andrews, made it very clear in December that they owned the quarantine of agricultural workers. He understood the scale of the problem of there being up to 20,000 people that were required just in Victoria alone. We think nationally it's around 30,000 by March, but that's just horticulture. That's not taking into the other shortages in other agricultural industries. So we're now saying to the states, this isn't a new problem. The scale of the problem hasn't changed. It's now important that you put in place the processes and the programs to bring these in. Some states have done a really good job. I've got to say South Australia is the gold standard. They've created their own processing facility in South Australia, and they're the first state to take up the in-country quarantining in Vanuatu. Victoria wouldn't sign up to, even though Dan Andrews in December said we should have some sort of Pacific solution. We've given it, but they haven't signed up to it. And we're just encouraging Dan Andrews to probably rethink that, because that also will build capacity and scale.
Yeah, the South Australian Agriculture Minister has quoted you saying it is the gold standard. He's pretty proud of that. Premier Andrews, though, he's described this ag visa system as a fantasy, or do you understand him to be referring to some other element, or why would it be a fantasy?
Well, I don't think, unfortunately, the Premier's understood that this is just another program that'll go to fixing the problem. And the scale of the problem hasn't changed from when Dan Andrews came out after National Cabinet in December, on the 11th of December last year, and said that this was a significant problem and an economic problem for Victoria, but also for those people in metropolitan Australia to keep grocery prices down. The scale of the problem hasn't changed. All this is just another tool to be able to address the issue. So he should have in place the processes in which to take workers either from under the ag visa or under the Pacific scheme. Nothing's changed. It's still the same, still a scale problem. All the Commonwealth has done is saying, here's another option for you to be able to bring those people that you've quantified as a shortage in your state, to be able to bring them in. Now, how you do that is still your sovereign right. We're not taking that away, The scale of the quantity of number of beds that are required are still the same as it was when Premier Andrews said it was such a problem in December last year. So unfortunately, he's made statements where he simply hasn't understood the scale of the problem. And in fact, I don't think he understands the issue at all, because he's actually sitting on a contract with the Tasmanian government to renew the quarantine of workers for Victoria to go through Tasmania. It's been sitting on his desk for over 2 weeks now, and he's been staring at it. And there are over 400 Pacific workers literally sitting on the tarmac in Pacific nations now, ready to come into Victoria via Tasmania, but they can't until Dan Andrews signs the form to renew the contract with Tasmania that finishes in September. And so I just don't think Premier Andrews' mind has been turned to this problem, so he hasn't understood it, and I've accepted that. In fact, I've written to him just to explain to him this isn't anything new. The scale of the problem's the same. This is just another program to help him bring those people in.
Well, but New South Wales has just extended their regional lockdown by another 2 weeks. Victoria's still in a regional lockdown themselves for goodness knows how long. Is there a leadership role that you can take, or the federal government can take, to bring state ministers together so we get the workers into a place where they can be quarantined without breaching lockdowns?
Well, again, we were asked for national leadership back in March last year, and we created this thing called the Ag Workers Code. And what that meant was that we identified agricultural workers as essential workers. And so the states would come together and create a COVID-safe way that they could go from one state to the other. They could continue to work between states. Sadly, not all the states would sign up, and Victoria did, and I congratulate them for that. In fact, they were one of the first to sign up, and that should be acknowledged. But we've got some states that won't sign up to that. The reality is we are going to have essential workers, and states are having essential workers work to keep our economy going and keep food on those shelves and stuff on our backs. So we have done that. We have created that. There is no change to the issue that faced us 12 months ago. It's simply about action. And this is where there has been a process put in place where all that has to happen is that if a state wants to bring people in, the Premier and the Chief Health Officer simply has to write to the Prime Minister and say, we want to bring in 600 or 700 workers from the Pacific or under the Ag visa. We want to bring them from Vietnam. He simply, or she writes to the Prime Minister and says, this is what we want to do, how we're going to do it. And we have set the process in place that we simply sign the visas. So there's a structured process in place. We don't need meetings for the sake of meetings. We need action. And so everyone knows what everyone's job is. And it's simply a matter now of everyone just getting on and doing it. We have meetings, agricultural ministers' meetings. They're prescribed. In fact, they're prescribed by National Cabinet in terms of what's on the agenda. It's not the agriculture ministers that set that. It's actually National Cabinet that sets that. So, but there's no need to have a meeting for the sake of having a meeting. We just need action. And I think that's what the public want. They don't want us to see sitting around a room talking about it, navel-gazing. The processes and protocols are all in place. It's just a matter of us taking them up and using them.
Minister, while I've got you, because there's one important thing I just wanted to check off on before I let you go. Grain growers have indicated that the peak body said with the new ag visa, they're looking maybe more from workers from the Northern Hemisphere with skills for the grain harvest. Is that something that I guess will go into further consultation of additional countries the ag visa could cover?
Well, the ag visa will cover the UK, but that can already happen now. So we've already given the Border Force Commissioner the power to approve visas where there are industries and occupations where there are work shortages. So there is nothing stopping the grains industry, and they've been made aware of that if they need those workers, you can still get that exemption through the Border Force Commissioner now. But the ag visa will cover the UK to start with. But other nations, it definitely can happen now. It's just a matter of making that application through Border Force, and the grains industry has been made aware of that, and we're happy to try and help facilitate that as quickly as we possibly can with them.
Well, Minister, thank you so much for your time. Very much appreciated for that breakdown.
Thanks for having me.